Mist gathered low over the pines, clinging to the uneven road like something reluctant to let go. In the middle of it walked a figure in a heavy oilskin coat, a hood pulled low enough to hide all but the faint reflection of their eyes in the glass of the lantern they carried. The light inside wasn't flame. It was a dull ember, the color of dying coals, pulsing as if breathing. The locals called them the ash lantern, though no one could say if it was the same traveler returning or a succession of them. Each swore the light had been older than their parents' parents, and each whispered about the places it led, places no one should follow. Tonight, the ash lantern walked toward a village that wasn't on any map. The trees leaned over the road, their branches sagging with ropes of moss like curtains. Somewhere in that green-black canopy, something moved, just slow enough to be mistaken for the wind. When the lantern-bearer reached the first house, its windows were boarded from the inside. The second was worse, black ash clinging to its walls in handprint shapes. No sound, not even an insect, followed their steps. They stopped at the well in the center of the empty square. The ember inside the lantern flared and turned a shade darker, like blood soaking into soil. From behind the well's stone lip came a voice, ragged but deliberate. "Put it out." The lantern-bearer didn't answer. Instead, they lifted the glass door, letting the ember's smoke roll into the mist. The voice rose in panic. "It's not yours to—" A shape lunged from the well, skin stretched too thin over a skull, eyes glazed with soot. The lantern-bearer caught its face in one hand, pushed it back into the dark and shut the glass door. The ember dimmed to a steady throb. By dawn, the ember's glow had thinned into a soft pulse, enough to mark the path ahead, but not enough to cast a shadow. The ash lantern left the village the same way they'd entered, without glancing back. The mist seemed to follow them, curling low over the dirt track like it feared the open air. Hours passed before they reached a grove of hornbeam trees. Here, the ground sank into a shallow bowl, where the fog thickened into an almost solid wall. Shapes flickered inside, tables set with rotted silverware, chairs bent under the weight of unseen guests. The lantern-bearer stepped into the fog, the ember brightening just enough to burn away the edges of the vision. Where the smoke parted, faces surfaced, pale, expressionless, their eyes painted black like masks. They watched the ash lantern with hunger disguised as patience. One by one, they turned toward the center of the grove, where a single chair stood empty. Its back was carved with spirals that seemed to move when stared at too long. The ember's pulse synced with the spiral's slow rotation. A woman's voice came from the chair, without anyone sitting in it. "You've brought us nothing this time." The lantern-bearer didn't speak. Instead, they held the lantern high, letting the ember's smoke curl toward the seat. The spiral froze. The fog recoiled, dragging the watchers into its folds. The voice tried again, sharper. "The feast is owed." The lantern door clicked shut. Whatever sound might have followed was caught inside, strangled before it could reach the air. The grove fell silent, except for the distant sound of something walking parallel to the path, just beyond sight. The ash lantern kept moving. By nightfall, the forest thinned into marshland. Pools of dark water reflected nothing. Not the sky, not the lantern's ember. Only the lantern-bearer's hooded shadow, stretched and warped. In the middle of the marsh rose a spire of black stone, its surface slick as oil. At its peak, rusted bell frames swayed in the wind, though no bells hung there. The air around it smelled of burnt cedar and iron. The ash lantern stopped at the water's edge. The ember pulsed quicker, and the marsh responded. Ripples spread in neat, concentric rings, as if something beneath had heard the signal. A low hum began, not from the spire, but from under the water. Figures surfaced slowly, their heads crowned in reeds, mouths sealed shut with twine. They circled the lantern-bearer, stopping just outside the reach of the light. One knelt in the muck and drew a shape into it with a finger, an unlit lantern. The others bowed their heads. The ash lantern stepped forward, lifting the glass door. Smoke spilled, curling toward the spire like a trail for the wind to follow. The frames at the top groaned, as if remembering a song they'd once known. The crowned figures raised their hands toward the light, not in worship, but in demand. The ember flared once, deep crimson, and then dimmed again. The crowned ones sank back beneath the water, without a sound, leaving only the widening rings. Above, the empty frames swayed harder, a silent peal echoing in the bones, rather than the ears. The ash lantern turned away, the spire already fading into the mist behind them. The path bled into a stretch of stone that arched over a narrow gorge. Moonlight glanced off its surface, revealing the bridge was made not from quarried rock, but from the fused remains of something white and ridged. Too large for human bones, too small for the leviathans of sailor tales. The ash lantern stepped onto it, each footfall sounding faintly hollow, as if the bridge were listening. The ember's light spread across the span, touching carvings along the inner rails. Rows of open mouths, each one full of teeth too sharp to be human. Halfway across, the wind rose, carrying with it the sound of gnashing. The mouths in the carvings twitched. One by one, they began to chatter, their teeth clicking in unison with the lantern-bearer's heartbeat. From the darkness below, pale hands gripped the underside of the bridge. Faces, if they could be called that, followed, their features stretched and wrong, jaws distending to match the mouths in the rails. They pulled themselves upward, their eyes fixed on the ember. The ash lantern paused. The glass door opened, and the ember exhaled a slow, black smoke. It drifted toward the watchers, curling into their open mouths. The gnashing slowed, then stopped altogether. The hands loosened their grip, and the faces sank back into the gorge without a sound. The bridge fell still. By the time the lantern-bearer stepped onto the far side, the carvings had closed their mouths. The teeth were gone. Beyond the bridge, the forest opened into an orchard that should not have been there. The trees were pale, their bark cracked like old bone, their leaves no more than curled scraps of parchment. From their branches hung fruit the color of smoldering coal, each one faintly glowing in rhythm with the ember inside the ash lantern. The ground beneath the trees was soft, as if layered with centuries of fallen ash. The lantern-bearer walked between the rows, the glow from the fruit swaying like dozens of watching eyes. Somewhere deep within, a sound stirred, branches creaking, roots splitting stone. A figure stepped out from behind one of the trees, wearing a mask carved from the same bone-like bark. Its voice was like cinders shifting in a hearth. "You've carried it far enough. Hang it here." The ash lantern paused. The ember pulsed in their grip, harder now, faster, matching neither the fruit nor the masked figure, but something deeper, older. The figure stepped closer, extending a hand with fingers like brittle twigs. "If it burns here, the roots will sleep again. If you carry it further..." The mask tilted. "They will wake." The lantern door creaked open. Smoke poured out, not rising but sinking into the soil. The masked figure froze, as did the orchard itself, the glow of the fruit dimming until the trees stood lifeless in the pale moonlight. The ember's last breath escaped into the earth, and the lantern's glass went dark. Without another glance at the orchard, the hooded traveler turned back toward the fog, the empty lantern swinging at their side. Somewhere behind them, beneath the ash, something began to breathe. The path from the orchard slid into a gulch where fog pooled like standing water. The soil went brittle underfoot, breaking with a dry ceramic crack. Beneath the crust lay bones, ribs nested in ribs, vertebrae flowering into wheels, skulls set where hips should be, as if the earth had tried to reassemble what it could not remember. The empty lantern swung at the traveler's side, glass black, yet each step set a faint glow trembling at its core, a breath that refused to die. Wind tunneled through the cut, not cold but patient. It carried voices shaped like words that never learned their endings. As the fog thinned, a causeway emerged, vertebrae laid end to end, whitening the gulch in a spine that climbed toward an arch of fused skulls. Moss braided their sutures. In the jawless grins, spider silk shivered like harp strings. The traveler set a boot on the first bone. Something scraped beneath, a deliberate drag of claws, keeping time with the heartbeat they would not admit was quickening. Another step. The lantern's ember fluttered, not bright, merely awake. In the corner of the eye, movement pressed the fog into the suggestion of a figure that vanished when faced. Halfway across, the arch shadow fell, and the chittering below ceased. Silence folded the gulch. The skulls leaned without moving. From the far side, a stand of black firs waited, each bough bent toward the path, like listeners with their heads cocked. The traveler crossed through the teeth of the arch and did not look back. Beyond, the road narrowed to a seam through thicket. Resin bled from the bark in dark beads. The lantern's glass fogged and cleared on a rhythm not the traveler's own, as if something under ash were counting. When the seam opened, it did so all at once, and the trees revealed a field of toppled stones, milestones, boundary markers, corner posts, dragged here from miles of country and set in rows, their faces turned down, their carved numbers bitten off. The wind died. The ember gave one slow pulse, and in that dim beat, a single stone lifted its face. It showed a groove worn by the same hand, again and again. A path of touch polished to a dull sheen. A date lived there, half erased. The traveler traced it with a gloved thumb, and the lantern coughed a coal red fleck that drifted to the stone and sank without a mark. The neighboring markers shivered. One rolled, another tilted up like a sleeper lifting an ear. In the hush, a murmur moved row to row. It was not words, it was the weight of them. A figure stepped out from between the markers, draped in surveyor's chains that clinked with a music of ownership. Their face was veiled with gauze stiffened by old rain. In one hand, a hammer whose head was a broken milestone. In the other, a ledger bound in hide. "You brought it past the arch," they said, voice both paper dry and river deep. "Then finish the measure. Set what wanders. Fix what was allowed to drift." The traveler lifted the dead lantern. "It burns only where it chooses." "It chooses where vows were broken," said the veiled one, tilting the ledger so its pages flashed with embossed scars. "Here, boundary forgot how to hold. Names lost their corners. You will redraw them, or the orchard will wake its roots hungry." They struck the nearest stone with the hammer. A tone rang, low, sorrowing, and rolled across the field. Markers sat up. Far off, the forest answered with a creak like frost breaking, The ember woke enough to stain the glass. The traveler stepped to the next stone and set a palm to its face. Heat bled through glove and skin, not burning, branding. In the heat, lived fences mended, debts counted, hands shaken and not withdrawn. North, the veiled figure said, and the field pivoted as if turning on a hinge. East, the rose slid. Again. With each command, the map remade itself, a muscle relearning function. The lantern dimmed, then steadied, satisfied with the work. When the last stone took its angle, the ledger sagged in relief. Good, the figure said, and the chains slackened as if a long-held breath had left them. The orchard felt that. You have one measure left. They pointed beyond the field, where the firs parted to reveal a bare hill scored by trenches. At the crest stood a post with no sign nailed to it, only a vacancy where meaning had been torn free. The ember brightened, then darkened again, as if tasting a future it did not want. Set that, the figure said softly, or everything you left hanging will fall. The hill's flanks were gouged by channels that once carried water, and now only held the memory of it. The traveler climbed in the hush that follows a verdict. At the top, the post waited, grain raised, head splintered, where a board had been ripped away. Nails rusted in a rectangle spoke the ghost of a word. The lantern beat slow, stubborn. Beneath the ash, the embers sought an agreement. Wind rose from below, dragging the orchard's scent, the mineral sweetness of cold coals, the ghost of sap. Something under the hill turned, a sleeper testing its chains. The traveler set the empty lantern on the post's iron bracket. It fit as if made for it. Nothing happened. They unlatched the door. No smoke lay inside to pour, no flame to command, only the dark, and in the dark, a shape like a seed. It was not heat. It was a compact, an old promise folded down until it could travel. The traveler cupped it in both hands. The hill paused its breathing. The orchard held its glow a heartbeat longer. Name, said the wind, not asking for the travelers, but for the signs. The seed waited. The ledger's weight lived behind the traveler's tongue now. The measure of borders, the angle of corners, the work of saying what is and keeping it said. They pressed the seed to the wood. It did not burn. It sank, a slow admission. The post took it the way earth takes a vow through a grave. Letters rose from the grain, not carved, grown. A word the traveler would not speak aloud, because speaking would make it small. The hill exhaled. Trenches forgot their hunger. Far off, bells without bells rang from a spire that had never learned sound. In the orchard, the coal fruit dimmed to a harmless ember, while roots rolled over and went back to sleep. The lantern hung empty again, but not hollow. It had traded fire for a fixed place. The traveler lifted it, feeling the lightness of a tool that had finished its task and would seek another shape. Down the slope, the field of stones lay quiet in their rightness. Past the arch, the spine of the road held, fog unwound. Something that had walked beside the traveler since the gulch let go without malice. They crossed back under the skulls. No scrape followed. Night arranged itself into ordinary dark, the kind with stars. The orchard's breath evened into winter. The traveler turned toward a different line through the trees, lantern swinging like a pendulum that had learned when to rest. Behind them, the sign kept its word, and the country around it remembered how.